Hello, thank you for joining me for another Weatherquest farming forecast. We've got lots to tell you about, so I'll press on straight away with the first slide I want to show you, which shows some of the interesting contrasts in rainfall across the country during the last few days since the 24th of September. Now, what we've found is that it's been these central and northwestern parts of the country that have had the most rain. This is 70 millimetres plus, up to 100 in some parts of the Lake District. And it does show you that some places, when you get persistent periods of rain, amass huge amounts of water, and it can very quickly lead to flooding when you get the next area of rain moving in. Other areas similarly wet, parts of Wales, especially the mountains of South Wales, and also some parts down here of southern England. Some interesting things to point out. The dry areas, southeastern Ireland tends to be a bit of a rain shadow area, so that's done far better in terms of not getting too waterlogged. Parts of southeast England have also had less rainfall in a notable way, although you can see here some quite large totals over East Anglia, and this is the surprise for me, quite a large chunk of northeast Scotland showing up with less rainfall than you might expect. Well, let's move on and see why this might all be going on, and it is all about the jet stream. And the jet stream is over this southern part of the country and the near continent, northern Scotland out of it, which possibly explains some of that, but it's on the cold side of things. And these undulating flows of strong winds in the upper air really drive our weather systems. Where the colours go into the reds and orange, then you're going to get the more active systems, and just watch what happens as we go through this week. And you'll see that the jet stream stays with us. A bit of a lull in here for a time, coming through in the middle part of the week. But other than that, it's jet stream pattern all the way. And that's because we've got a very unsettled pattern over the Atlantic. And each little undulation of this can very quickly spin up a new low and bring with it some areas of rain as well. So here's our current low. It's quite an active feature. It's got a band of slow-moving heavy rain over northern Britain, given some big flooding problems there in what's already a very wet part of the country. Around the southern side of this low, you're getting a circulation of heavy thundery downpours. So in a local sense, those are giving some heavy rain, but it's by no means comparable to the widespread heavy rain that's falling on some of these catchments up in the north. Drier weather in the far north, in different air, in colder air, much colder air about to come down from the far north past Scandinavia. And as this northerly sets in down the North Sea, it's going to bring colder air to us. Notice a ridge of high pressure just beginning to appear in the west, and behind me a very deep low. That is Lorenzo. Now, it was a very severe hurricane at one stage, category 5, a long way away from us, where the Atlantic waters are warm, 27 Celsius or so. These things gain a lot of energy. As it drifts northwards, gets in the pattern and comes up past the British Isles, sea temperatures are much lower and it loses its energy. But this is the big change this week. Middle part of the week, ridge of high pressure. So some quieter weather, good spraying opportunities, light winds. But remember, we've brought cold air down across this part of the chart. So with light winds, it does mean there's the prospect of some quite cold nights, with frost to be mentioned, even perhaps for some southern areas, just a touch, but it's certainly not out of the question. And then we have to deal with what happens with Lorenzo. Now, Lorenzo is going to be continuing to decay. At the moment, the track's suggested to be up to the northwest of the country, and it will bring some very heavy rain to some places, some strong winds just on this northwestern fringe at the moment, we think, and the fronts being carried across will have some high rainfall totals with them, but shouldn't have the intensity that you might get up to the north and west. And then we have this unsettled looking pattern coming in behind it. So we've got very changeable weather on offer. It's going to remain that way during the following period, because as Lorenzo continues to decay and weakens and drifts away, we're left with troughs of low pressure with bands of rain, further fronts coming across, and remember that jet stream looked very strong, feeding these new features in. They can spin up and become big lows very quickly. So just be aware for some quite changeable weather. Now, I know some of you are trying to get the spraying done, not much of it going on, but there is some, and it's interesting that right in the middle of a low, if there aren't many showers there, then it can give you some opportunities, but by and large, our real opportunities will come when that ridge of high pressure moves in. Remember, I mentioned there's a ridge coming in, and you can see a big area of green when it's suitable for spraying in that middle part of the week. Now, once that's gone away, then it does look much more unsettled. There's Lorenzo, by the way, and you can see the isobars closer together. Everything doesn't look like it's very friendly for spraying conditions, and you'll have to have your wits about you to capture any of these little drier slots when the winds are just easing down a bit. So it's a good time to talk to our forecasters. If you've got a really desperately urgent problem that you need resolving to do with the forecast in these unsettled times, then you can always talk to our forecasters, and they're available on 09065 777675 throughout the day, and you can talk to them and ask them questions. Calls are £1.55 a minute, plus network charges. So anyway, they're there to help you, and I'm sure you'll be able to get some of your questions answered there. Now, this is an interesting display because it's one of these ensemble forecasts. Remember where we run the model several times using slightly different starting conditions to show how sensitive the atmosphere is to small changes, just giving it a little tweak. So here you can see the big rise in pressure as we get the ridge coming in, then things all fairly quiet, and this rainfall total you see here peaks today, and then it just levels off while the ridge is in. So while this ridge is in, we get very little extra rainfall. And then what happens is when we get to late Thursday into Friday, this is when Lorenzo brings its very warm, moist tropical air across the country, the totals start coming up. Remember, this is potential water gain in Cambridge on the eastern side of the country. The western side will be much bigger totals than this, by the way. And you can see there's a lot of uncertainty about the amount of water expected to come from these systems. It depends on the activity of the front as it comes past, maybe embedded showers on it, which can give a lot of uncertainty. But totals could vary quite widely from about 10 millimetres of rain to 50 or 60. So that's a big change. And in order to accommodate those choices, you're going to need to keep in touch with us for those difficult decisions. But you can see typically it's going to be about an inch or so of rain during this period for the next 10 days or so. We can look at the pressure pattern, and the pressure pattern, well, reflects the ridge coming in. You can see all the models are very happy about this build-in pressure as we go through this middle part of the week. That's when you have your drier weather, that's when you have your spraying conditions. It's also when you have your colder weather with the risk of frosts. And then a lot of uncertainty when the jet stream starts to feed back in again with various lows, dips you can see here, some quite low pressure systems coming through, but also equally in between them, some quite strong ridges, 20,000, 20 millibars, 1,000, 30 millibars. So the weather this time of year can be very difficult to pin down. So it's best to keep in touch with the forecast charts day by day. Okay, let's have a look at into the second week, because we've talked a lot about the first week. Second week, tendency for high pressure to the southwest, down towards the Azores here. And then you've got average pressure through the middle, slightly lower than average pressure on the northern side of the country. So probably implies windier weather, and it does seem as if it suggests that we're going to get this wetter than average set of charts for the north and west of the country, and possibly slightly drier hint in the south, which you can sometimes get with these strong flows around the ridge near the Azores. As for temperatures, quite a standout feature there, very cold air over Eastern Europe and Russia, and quite a strength to the warmth developing over Spain and Portugal. So that's also quite an interesting feature, but for us, typical October temperatures for the second week. As we go into week 3, you can see still this contrast between lower than average pressure in the north, slightly higher than average pressure in the south, probably implies fairly breezy weather. And it therefore means we're going to keep looking to the west for our weather. And the western coast will also be the bits that have the slightly above average rainfall. Still a hint that parts of the south and east may be just a little bit drier than average. It's not to say no rain, but slightly drier than average. Looking at the temperatures, notice one big change over here to the east. We've got rid of that cold bias over Eastern Europe and Russia. Still warm down here over Spain and Portugal. Pretty much average sort of looking temperatures in this middle bit of Europe. Includes much of the near continent and all of the British Isles. As we move on into week 4, a sort of odd feature, not quite sure what to make of this, but it does seem to suggest slightly lower than average pressure over the UK. It could mean a showery risk, it could mean the threat of some unsettled weather tending to get locked over us. Remember, it's an average for a period, so we need to watch out on that. So it's not necessarily all quietness, it could be slightly more unsettled for a time there. And you'll notice now the whole of the British Isles has got this slightly greenish hue to it, which suggests a little bit wetter than average. So that's the trend as we go into that 4th week of October. It's not the end of the world, but it does look like a typical unsettled end to the month. Temperatures, because this is typically unsettled time of the year, temperatures will end up being near average as well. This warmth is subsiding a bit down here to the south, but still slightly warmer than average over the continent. So what can we make of it all? Well, we can make this. We can say some briefly settled weather coming through the middle part of this week. That's your good outdoor opportunity before we have to deal with whatever happens to Hurricane Lorenzo. It looks like it's mainly in the north and west of the country, but it will bring some outbreaks of rain to the south too, even though not the strong winds. As for the return to unsettled weather, well, by the end of the week, it does look as if that's going to happen, and then we're stuck with that through to mid-October at least. As for the temperatures, near or slightly above average. Now that's not a surprise when you think that the summer has put all that warmth into the Atlantic and the waters around Britain, so any air coming from the west is going to be bringing slightly warmer air rather than this cold northerly we'll have to deal with over the next 36 hours. And then lastly, a look at this just hint. There might be something a little bit drier in the south by the middle of the month. So there we are, complicated week. If you want more information, you can always follow us on Twitter and contact us via info@weatherquest.co.uk. And do keep in touch. We'd love to hear from you, things that you'd be interested in seeing in these forecasts. Thank you for watching.